Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here, and we will be speaking about when you are. This class is dedicated by Mark and Rebecca Belinsky in loving memory of Asya Bas Ben-Sion upon her 4th yahrzeit on the 18th of Sivan. These programs and classes are all made possible. They're free, but they're made possible through your contributions, so it's a great opportunity to be able to dedicate or sponsor a class in memory of a loved one or in honor of a loved one. Birthdays, graduations, obviously yahrzeits, we should only know of good news. And with that, let us begin this discussion. How to muster up energy when you're exhausted. A good question where to begin, that I'd like to begin with, is the question of, do you know how much energy you actually have? How much energy is in your gas tank? You know, when you buy a car, for example, you know how many miles you can drive, that many gallons that you can put into your gas tank. So you know your capacity, and you know when you need to refill, etc. Do you know what your gas tank is filled with? Do you know the capacity? How much potential do we have in our reservoirs? Why is this such an important question? Because many of us often complain and say, I'm exhausted, I'm beat up, I'm drained, I'm spent, I'm overwhelmed. And often we get resigned to the point of frustration that we can't move on. Now, it may be true, those statements, and it's also necessary for every human being to have times of where we have respite, where we have rest periods, where we have time to recharge our batteries, a certain calm. But what we don't want is to write ourselves off and forget about our potential. You don't want to underestimate yourself. So when a person makes those statements that they're saying they're tired, they're exhausted, they are, just use different expressions. So before you gripe and write yourself off, you want to make sure that your feelings of inadequacy are not compromising the big question that you have to ask yourselves: do I even know what I'm capable of before I quit? So that's why it's so vital to understand that we may have great potential, and because of our negative feelings or because of our failures or because of our low self-esteem or whatever it may be, we may give up on ourselves. So yes, there are times, of course, every person needs to have times of calm and times when they, downtime to, as I said, to recharge. But you never want to write yourself off into thinking that you're not capable of certain things, especially if you have no clue how much you do have in your gas tank, so to speak. But then, of course, the question is this. The fact that we have this great potential is beautiful, but how do you access it? How do you access it? How do you dig deeper and call upon these hidden reserves when you're feeling drained? Or to put it another way, the conundrum is this. If you don't feel that you have strength, how can you have the strength to go access your inner strengths? So it could be you have them, but you need gas to get to the gas station. No. So that's what we will be discussing. We'll be discussing both understanding our great potential as well as being able to figure out how to access it when we don't feel the energy or the strength to access it. That's what we need to address. And that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to call upon certain tremendous mystical texts that on the surface may sound mystical, but actually profound lessons in human psychology and the topic. The topic is this is something that everybody deals with, is negative feelings of incapable of achieving certain goals. And even when we were maybe younger and more idealistic, there comes a point in your life you say, you throw in the towel. And you feel weaker, you don't feel the strength, you don't feel the resolve. You wake up in the morning spent and depressed and saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and all the cynicism that settles in. So that, of course, is a given reality that we have to contend with. But obviously the goal of any discussion like this, and anyone listening to my classes knows that I am not of the belief that one should give in to their own negative feelings. And that's why it's vital that we challenge ourselves. If someone's not ready to challenge themselves and they're ready to say, I'm comfortable with misery and I'm comfortable with failure and I'm comfortable with resignation of not achieving things, obviously it's very difficult to help someone that's not willing to help themselves. So no one can really completely solve their own problems, but one thing is necessary: you have to enter, you have to show up, as they say. You have to enter the ring and be ready to take upon yourself the challenges. So that is something that I would love to be able to inspire and motivate someone to do, but that is obviously a prerequisite. If, for example, you're going to shut off this program right now, before I continue, whatever I say, even if it has any value, will not be heard. So the key thing is to have belief in yourself to the extent to say, you know what, I don't want to die knowing that maybe I had potential to achieve certain things, and I was my own worst enemy, and I was my own block and not allowing myself to achieve those goals. So let us address this issue. I'm going to talk about it in the context of, let's start with that analogy I gave, our potential. Now, how do we know what the potential of something is? In a way, you can say that's the heart of what all science is about. Science doesn't just look at the surface level of something, it looks to find what is the energy within that and how much potential it carries. So since when we tap into the atoms, we can access atomic energy that on the surface you'd never know was there. When we even dig an oil well, or look for natural gas, or for that matter, discover precious gems, diamonds and so on, deep in the ground or deep in the mountains, what are we doing? We're finding precious value, energy, power, whatever you want to call it, in places that on the surface we wouldn't see. Sometimes you have to dig for it, sometimes you have to dive for it, sometimes you have to drill. There's all these different things. So in the physical world is one of the best teachers of how to look at the spiritual world. Because indeed, as the mystics explain, the material world was created in the image of the spiritual world. You can think of it like parallel worlds. So when we look at our bodies, and we look at human nature, and we look at the nature of the general world, you're really seeing a macrocosm of your own microcosm. Not just of your physiological microcosm, but also of your spiritual, emotional, and psychological makeup. That's a tremendous statement, because if you ask psychologists, they say, how do you know what the psyche looks like? How do we know what the subconscious looks like? But answer will usually be trial and error. Experimentation. You talk to enough people. You have clients. You observe. You examine. You test. You test different methods. And we feel it out. It's like actually walking in a dark room. Initially, you don't have no clue what's going on in the dark. But if you walk enough times and you touch this and touch that, you start extrapolate a type of image of what is going on in the inner unconscious or subconscious. I'm going to be using the word superconscious because in mystical thinking, Jewish mystical thinking, first comes the superconscious, then the conscious. When you say subconscious or you say unconscious, it almost sounds like the subterranean level, like below. When the truth is, it's above. First comes the superconscious, then comes the conscious. But the idea is a similar idea, and that is, we have never seen that state. That's why it's called a subconscious, or unconscious, or superconscious. So that's usually, but in mysticism, it adds another dimension. In metaphysics, it adds, we could also call it metapsychology. If metaphysics is, whatever metaphysics is to physics, metapsychology is to psychology. Psychology would be what human beings observe. Metapsychology would be what the mystics have discovered or have received through revelation, the inner workings of the human psyche, which is reflective of and reflects the psyche of the entire universe. So when you look around, you want to see what does it feel like, for example, to soar? Transcendence. Yes, we see the poets and the romantics. What do they use? They use examples of music. My soaring heart, like a soaring bird. Why do they use a bird? Because a bird is something we all can recognize. We'll use sunsets. We'll use oceans. We'll use all kinds of natural examples that evoke a certain feeling and a certain sentiment that you can say, I relate to. So in a way, you can say the universe is our best teacher. So if you want to understand what you're capable of, we have to use the same measuring tools as we use. How do we find out what anything is capable of? How do you know, for example, if a certain field or a certain environment is conducive to growing grapes? For example, there are areas in New York State, in Long Island, in California, obviously in France, in Italy, that are conducive. What have they discovered? By planting certain, either due to the soil, due to the climate, due to weather conditions, that creates the best type of environment to grow excellent types of grapes. And the same thing is with oranges, and the same thing is with other fruits and vegetables. What is that? How was that discovered? Again, through trial and error, through history, discovered regions in the world that were conducive for certain type of vegetation and growth. And there's still many secrets that the earth carries that we still continue to look for. There are places that have excellent clay reservoirs. There are places where you find iron, where you find other natural resources. And this is, again, through history, we've discovered different places, excavating, and so on. And there's always, as I said, there's always more. So the methods that we use to find and discover inner resources, and even to measure to some extent, and remember, measuring is a very, let's say, tenuous process, because who really knows how much oil there is? I remember when we were in high school, we were told that by the year 1990, we will have dried up all natural resources of natural gas and oil. And that wasn't the case at all. Yes, we did develop technologies to create more energy efficient appliances and automobiles and so on, but there was far more resources. Until this day, nobody can measure how much oil is there in the earth. You know, everybody's fascinated by the lava pouring out of the volcanoes in Hawaii. You look at it, you see something so like almost surreal, like from another planet. Suddenly the earth has opened up in a certain corner and it's belching out this tremendous hot lava that's coming from the heart of the earth. And you start wondering what's going on beneath the surface. And we know very little. We know some, but we know very little. And the same thing with oceans, and the same thing with any type of experience. So when you look at something, the wise man today will say, it never is what it appears. What you see is not what you get. In other words, if you look at the surface, someone look at a room, and there's no human beings there, is it an inanimate room? No, absolutely not. It's buzzing and pulsating with energy. Every follicle of hair, every fiber of existence is filled with unbelievable power of energy. Just look at our phones now. Look at our little gadgets. How much can fit into our microprocessor? Once would have taken blocks of computers, can all be done now in the area of your own little finger, index finger. So the same is with the human being. We carry and contain so much tremendous potential, and the question is, how do we access it? I don't know if we can come away with a way of measuring how much we have, just like someone will say, how many ideas can fit into your brain? Nobody's ever figured out, because the brain has never run out of memory, like a computer can run out of. Gigabyte, terabytes, and so on. 10 terabytes, 100 terabytes, 1,000,000 terabytes. And all the other what comes terabytes, I don't know what comes next, whatever it is. How much can fit into the human brain? How many ideas? How much percentage of our brains do we use? The same question can be asked about our hearts. How much percentage of your love will you actualize in your lifetime? What percentage of your other faculties, emotions, and strengths will you actualize? So I don't know if we're going to come away with a measure, because it's almost impossible to measure something that we cannot know, we cannot see, but we can figure out how to access it, and how to access more than we are presently accessing. So think of ourselves as like a little mini Earth that has in it layers and layers and reservoirs of resources, endless resources, exactly like the Earth. And the Earth itself also conceals its strengths. Even though a volcano could be dangerous if you're in its proximity, but the fact of the matter is, it also creates things. That lava will dry up and can create mountains, islands, and even can create a new form of vegetation and the new environments and so on. So the fact of the matter is, this mini Earth that we are, we also have plenty going on inside of us. But just as it's hidden, and how do we access it? So that's what we're going to now go into more detail. So let's use the analogy again. We're going to find a few analogies I'm going to use. I'll use the analogy of grapes. I'm going to use the analogy of olives. I'm going to use the analogy of a hot coal and of a flintstone, just to begin with. So you'll see in a moment the analogy. Okay. You look at a fruit like a grape. At the surface level, you see the grape, and what do you see? 1 second here. What do you see when you look at a grape? So if you taste it, it can taste sweet, it could taste a little bitter. Different grapes have different tastes. Fine. But what happens when you squeeze the grape. So a little juice comes out of it. Now this juice on its own does not turn into wine. Wine will need fermentation, will need a process, will need time, and so on. So what do you have going on is that we see a grape, but we don't see its full potential, and definitely not its potency. The same thing with an olive oil. There's a whole process how to process olive oil. Now you can squeeze the olive and get some oil, but there's a bigger process of getting the different levels of oil and purer oil and so on. Then there's the two stones I just mentioned. A coal. When a coal is lit up, so a hot coal, when you look at it at the surface level, you only see a white covering. For all you know, it's burned out. Maybe the coal is burned out. But a hot coal could also be boiling hot, and you don't see it. Then you fan it, or you blow on it, or God forbid, something you put your finger on it, I won't say your finger. If you put something on it, suddenly a flame comes bursting forth. Why? Because the flame is in there, within the coal, but it's concealed. When you fan it, or you place something in it, another way you stimulate it, the flame comes alive. What about a flintstone? A flintstone is even more concealed. When you look at a flintstone, it's just a stone. You have no idea that you can elicit a spark from the stone. But there are stones that have the sparks that when you strike it hard, one flintstone on a rock, or some other way, like a match, is an equivalent that creates that same idea, that what happens, suddenly it sparks something, and that spark can build a fire, can be lit. When you look at the stone, nothing there. As a matter of fact, it's even more concealed, and not just quantitatively, but qualitatively than the hot coal. Why? Because a flintstone you can put into water, and it doesn't lose its power. You put a hot coal in water, it will extinguish the coal. You touch a flintstone, you won't get burned. You touch a hot coal, God forbid, you will. So you see here two levels of concealment. And as such, these two examples that I just gave of the hot coal and the flintstone are examples actually used by the Hasidic masters based on Kabbalistic ideas to explain that every entity has its revealed state, and then it has a concealed state, and it has a concealed state. We'll call it superconscious, conscious, superconscious, and superconscious. And this is how it works. The revealed state would be like the flame, a bursting flame, a flame that is burning. Everyone sees it. What is that reflective in our own personal lives? Active faculties. You're using your eyes, I see things. My ears hear things. My arms can move, can shake things, can throw things, and so on. Every part of every limb, every organ of the human being has its faculties. A healthy faculty, it's working, humming along. But every faculty also has its concealed state. For example, when I'm standing with my hand right now, I have the power, for instance, to, let's say, throw a stone up 100 feet. But until I throw it, where is that power? That power is like a flame inside the coal. It's residing there, but in a way it's dormant, in the sense that it is not revealed. So that is called a concealed state, but it exists. An existent concealed state. Now, when I actualize it, then it comes from the concealed to the revealed. Same example would be your eyes. When your eyes are open, you see. When your eyes are closed, you still have the capacity to see, but you're not actually seeing. And someone will say, can the person see it? Just open your eyes, and you'll be able to see. Not forever, meaning not the farthest distances, but to a certain extent, you'll be able to see. If you have healthier eyes, 20/20 vision. Same thing with your ears, the same thing with your other faculties. So we have a revealed state and we have a concealed state. We can say the concealed state is a state that is concealed from the revealed. It's not fundamentally concealed. It's just one step away from being revealed, just like it's one step away of fanning the coal, one step away of opening your eyes or extending your arm and using it. So for example, if I write something, I write a letter, A, B, C, D. Before I wrote it, my hand could write A, B, C, D. I could write hundreds of letters, thousands of different letters and words and even books and so on. But while I don't do it, it's still in that potential state. When I do it, I write to a certain extent. That doesn't mean I've exhausted my ability to continue writing. So that would be called a helem, a concealment, but it's one that's close to be revealed, which means it's just like behind a closed door. You need to open the door and it comes out. But then there's a helam, there's a concealment that does not have, is not even an existent state. It's concealed from the eye, but it's not concealed. You can't just fan the flame. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to throw a stone. Now I'm not throwing. I'll just open my eyes. Here we're talking about something that you're going to access, a state that is fundamentally concealed. And here's where the flintstone comes in. The flintstone, you'll not, if you break open the stone, you're not going to find sparks. You can't feel it. You can't touch it. You can only strike it. When you strike it hard, the spark, it'll give off a spark. Sparks will come from it. That is considered a superconscious state. Why? Because it's not just readily available. Here I could say, I have the potential, I can throw a stone 300 feet. Sometimes I'll use all my strength. Sometimes I'll use part of my strength. Sometimes I won't use any of that strength. That's all level 2, not level 3. Level 3 is saying, how do you know you can only throw 300 feet? Maybe you can throw 600 feet. So I'll say, well, as far as I've thrown, I could only throw 300 feet. They'll say, that's your experience. Maybe with conditioning and exercise and practice, you can strengthen your muscles. You strengthen your muscles, then the conventional 300 can turn to 400, maybe 500, maybe 600. So now we're already going, how do we dig deeper and access reserves, access resources that are not readily available? To fan a coal doesn't take much effort. Just like to open your eyes doesn't take much effort. But to access new strengths, someone will say, one second, my eyes can see a certain way. To see more, you may need exercises, you may need eyeglasses. You may need something to help support. You may need binoculars, a telescope, other tools that help you see further and sharper than you could see on your own. So how do we access this deeper one? The first one you can say, okay, I need a little effort to fan the flame, to open my eyes, to actualize my potential. So you could have a student in class who has potential, and the teacher will say, why are you being lazy? Motivate them through competition or some other way, and the student suddenly starts shining. What's happened? You've revealed the concealed potential. But what about the concealed potential that is not even accessible in a regular way? What do you do then? And that's what we were talking about earlier. How much potential do you have there? The potential that is close to actualization, most of us can pretty much measure, because let's say when you take a stress test, or you run a marathon, or you exercise, you'll see. I can exercise for 5 minutes, I can run at a pace of, let's say, 5 miles a minute. I don't know if that's fast, that's pretty fast, right? Let's say 2 miles a minute, whatever. You condition yourself, you can go up. So you can test it and say, that's where my capacity is now. But with training and conditioning and with work, you can access a lot more. That you would need to have extra exertion, not just regular effort. Some additional effort, which we're going to talk about, how we access it. But my point that I wanted to first make is that we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and realize what's sitting here, what you see. And when I say see, I don't just mean with your eyes that you see in the mirror your physical appearance. I'm talking about what you see, what you know about yourself. Your self-awareness is really based on your experiences. I know what I've experienced. You may know a little more than you experienced because you've also tested yourself. You've been pushed a little. When you've been pushed, you could say, yes, I was able to achieve a little more. So you can describe more or less your revealed state and some of your concealed state. Most of us, even on the first level of concealment, we can't really go all the way because how far have you pushed yourself? But let's, for argument's sake, you have pushed yourself. You've tried to exercise. You've tried to do other things. And I'll move to the psychological level as well. You try to improve your self-image, self-awareness, self-esteem, relationships. You've tried this, you've tried that. So all you can say is, what I know about myself is what I have experienced and what I've tried. Someone will say to you, maybe you could be pushed more. Yeah, maybe. An honest person would have to say maybe. Because you don't know, maybe you weren't pushed enough, maybe you weren't encouraged enough, maybe you weren't guided, maybe you didn't have good role models. I mean, the list goes on of all the usual suspects that can be factors that did not let you actualize yourself. And this is still on the first level of concealment, the supra state. Supra state is one that is mostly beyond most of us because you can't even actualize that, access that without some extra effort, which we're going to, of course, These are the two secrets I'm going to share with you soon of how we do that. Because here you're already talking about not just how far you can throw a stone. That's an actual reality. You throw a stone, you try. Here, take a javelin or take a rock or take anything and throw it. Use your strongest strength, and how far can you throw? How high can you jump? A whole list of things that we can be doing to continuously maximize. But that's... There's a bunch of ways you can maximize this. So that's one thing we need to address. But what I want to really address is something much deeper. The inner strengths that go back into the flintstone level, where it's not even considered a concealment that you can access. It's a concealment that's beyond direct access, but there are ways to access that. And in nature, you'll find this as well. Like I said, the flintstone versus the coal, the hot coal. So what causes a flintstone to actually give off a spark? You strike it. As I said, we've emulated that with the striking of a match. You look at a match, and if you wouldn't know better, you could say just a piece of a stick with some type of something at the edge. And unless you ever strike a match, you'll never know that it can create a flame. Now, match is not a perfect example because a match, you put into water, you won't be able to light it, at least till it dries up. Even then, maybe it's been spoiled. With a flintstone, it's deeper. The spark is even deeply embedded. In our own insides, in our own psyches and core soul, we have both levels of concealment. We have the superconscious, and we have the supra. In Kabbalistic terminology, you'd say there's the 10 faculties, the 10 spheres, going from Chachma, Bina, Das, 3 cognitive ones, or called Chachma, Bina in this case, understand as a kernel of an idea and the development of the idea. Then you have the 7 emotions. So you have 10 spheres, a structure of 10 spheres. It's 3 cognitive, 7 emotional. Those are conscious faculties. Now, what do I mean by conscious? It means that you can access them, and they also have, obviously, potential. Everyone's wisdom can be actualized more and more. Same thing with your love. Same thing with your discipline. Same thing with your compassion. So all these different levels are existent on that conscious. So the conscious has, but behind the conscious lies a superconscious. That would be called the lower level of Keser in Kabbalistic terminology. What means the lower level of Keser? It's called Arich Anpin, superconscious. It lies like the hidden, like the hot coal that has the potential to turn into a flaming coal. So the flaming coal is when the faculties are revealed and expressed. The hot coal, the white coal, is when it's still in a state of concealment, but it's accessible. You have to fan it. It's not difficult to access. It's a state of concealment that can be revealed. Then you have a deeper level, and that is called the higher level of Keser, called Atik Yomen, which refers to the superconscious. That would be more like the flintstone. So how do we access that part of the superconscious? And often that is the key when you're dealing with someone who's feeling really down and feeling really, as I said, we said in the title of this class, when completely exhausted. You may need to access this super. So how do you do it? Let's talk of the flintstone. You have to strike it. So what does striking do? Striking accesses something that is not readily accessible. So the type of striking is like almost a jolt, a shock to the system that shakes it up and reveals something that it would not be revealed on its own, which we see often. You need to do that at times. If a person's really in a state of, let's say, a comatose state, sometimes you really need to shock them out of it. But shock doesn't always mean negative. Shock doesn't necessarily mean negative. The reason, frankly, why many people wake up when they hit rock bottom, when things really get bad, is because on the conscious level, things haven't worked. Even on the superconscious level, things have not worked. So what happens is a traumatic experience or hitting rock bottom shakes them up and they suddenly realize this is really bad. That is, in a way, touching their core. And unfortunately, often it happens in negative ways. But we don't need negative ways. Striking a flintstone can be done in a positive way. And that is through exerted effort. There's a concept in Jewish thought that the Kabbalists cite in regard to this. What is the equivalent in our emotional state and emotional being to striking a flintstone? Is exertion. strong effort. For example, when you sit down to study something, and something deep, something difficult, something dense. So you could say, you know what, I'll use my mind, I'll figure out as much as I can. That's not necessarily exertion. Striking your mind means challenging your mind, where you have to toil, where you really struggle. And it doesn't matter whether you have a good mind or not a good mind, everybody will grow through struggling. And struggling means I don't understand it, but I'm going to break my head. You ever hear the expression, break your head? Break your head is exactly the word striking the stone. And then you access something you don't access usually. Because what's done, the pressure, is what draws out from the superconscious. So that's tool number one, exertion, effort. What does that mean in simple English? It means simple English, to join a class or to study on your own, but in a way that you're going to figure out a text or some idea that initially is very difficult, and your lazy side will say, don't bother. But the other side will say, no, you're going to shake your system up by forcing yourself to understand this, by going over it again and reviewing it again and asking the questions and writing it down and being confused. And all that comes with exertion, mental exertion. What is called yegia b'Torah is sometimes the expression. The exertion and the effort to try to understand something that's difficult to understand. And precisely the more difficult it is, the more you have to break your head to figure it out, the more you're striking the flintstone, and the more resources you're going to access within you. That's number one. And I'm going to elaborate some more about this in a moment. Tool number two, they say, is the concept of complete commitment. Complete commitment. Kabbalat ol is the expression in Hebrew. What does complete commitment mean? Complete commitment is a good example would be you sign up and mobilize yourself and draft yourself into the army. Yep, you wake up the first morning, you think you could sleep late? No. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., they're pulling you out of bed. And if you don't get out of bed, they'll throw cold water over you. And then they pack up 300 pounds on your back, and they tell you to climb up a wet mountain. And you say to yourself, what am I doing here? What do I need this for? Just the other night, I was sleeping comfortably in my bed with a warm blanket. I was able to press the snooze button as many times as I like. What am I doing here? Commitment, but you've committed. You're in. Then the battle begins. And you suddenly see people, God forbid, being shot or dying. I'm using this example just to drive the point home. And you say, what am I doing here? And you start retreating. Why do I put myself at risk? You're committed. Commitment. The commitment pushes you farther than you would ever go out of your comfort zone because of the commitment. So commitment is a tremendous tool in life that you find many people avoid. They'll actually tell you, when I'm comfortable, strength is by doing a secret, which is exertion. These are the two tools. Why are they so powerful? Because they force you to get out of your own way. Left out to your own recourse, to your own choices, what are you going to do? You're not going to exert yourself more than you're comfortable doing, and you're not going to commit more than you're comfortable doing. So it's precisely what you don't want to do is what you need to do. I know nobody maybe likes to hear this, but I have never found another approach. Every other thing is going to be superficial and probably even destructive. So when we use tools, for example, numbing ourselves or self-medicating ourselves, or we think we're going to find some magic trick or press a button to relieve some of our misery, you know yourself where that's going to lead. These are the two tools that are guaranteed to work. And it's precisely the resistance that you have to them that is a sign that that's exactly what you need. So one is the exertion, and the other is the commitment. And when a person has those two things, that can catapult you to places you can never reach on your own. Never. Because what it does is, it accesses the supra. It's the flintstone. And once you access that, obviously, you can also access the hot coal and reveal it into your conscious state. So this is the key, is to go dig deeper to get more. Which is why you'll find many people who've gone through difficult times and then came through it, they'll say, is the most difficult moments that ultimately shaped me into the diamond, to the brilliant stone that I am today. I don't know if they'll say it in those words talking about themselves, but often that refinement came due to some of their suffering. Not because suffering is a good thing, but the suffering forced the issue to dig in the deepest levels and access something. Now, of course, the trap is many of us suffer and we never access anything. That's a sad reality. But you absolutely can access if it's done correctly, which I'm going to elaborate on in a moment. So to go back to sum up what I'm saying here is like this. When you ask the question, how to muster up energy when you're exhausted, you'll say, I'm exhausted. Once I get rested, that's when I'll muster up energy. Now, yes, that's true. And all of us need to have, as I said, our sleep and our rest periods and times when we have our downtime. But we're talking about if a person's an ongoing low maintenance, a low level, a low flame level, where they're not functioning and they're constantly exhausted. And that doesn't always mean physically exhausted. It could also be psychologically exhausted, emotionally exhausted. The key thing here is effort, exertion, and commitment. So what do you suggest to someone who's in that place? They say, I'm exhausted. What are you telling me to exert myself? I'm not telling you to go pick up 1,000 pounds, a ton of bricks when you're incapable of doing that. We're talking about sitting down, taking a good book, maybe a dense text, something difficult, studying it, and exerting yourself. You say, but I'm exhausted? This will help you stop getting exhausted. So if we're talking about going exhausted, I'm not going to suggest someone who's extremely fatigued or exhausted to go run a marathon of 22 miles. But to sit in your own home, or in a classroom, or wherever you may be, or in a synagogue, or in a place of study, and say, okay, I'm going to learn a text with someone once a week, and I'm going to work on really understanding it. And I'm going to write down what I study, and I'm going to ask questions and counter arguments until I get it. This is a tool that helps you get to a place that actually, ironically, helps you get less exhausted. If I said exertion of the negative sort, go into a slave labor camp or some other type of negative type of experience, that's not what we're suggesting here. We're talking about an exertion that's a healthy exertion. Or to go out of your way to help somebody and making an effort, not the easy thing. To do something outside your comfort zone is yet another form of exertion. Anything that goes beyond your patterns and routines, where you push yourself more than your natural abilities, that will cause you to access the inner flame, the inner spark of the flintstone. As we speak even about squeezing olives, pressing olives or grapes. So there you can say it's just a little press. No, but to get the real olive oil, to get the real wine, it's more than just pressing. It's about really reaching deeper and a whole process of accessing the inner potency of these fruits. And the same thing is with other elements and other whether it's talking natural resources like natural gas or oil or other such resources. So exertion is number one. And number two is the commitment. Where do you get the commitment when you're exhausted? The commitment is, I know I'm here on this earth. I was blessed with life. I was sent here for a purpose. And I've been drafted into an army. Into the army, a divine army of fulfilling my calling in this world. I was given another day of life. I have a commitment to this contract. If I was given if I was given another day to breathe, another day to function, another day to live, I have an obligation. Feeling that obligation, as opposed to saying I can do whatever I like, and nobody can tell me what to do, is the key, number two, to accessing your inner resources. Because you're committed. And the commitment forces you, I'm in. I have no way out. I can tell you from my own experiences, the greatest things that I've accomplished. And many times you feel like, you've done things already, why do more, is by doing these two things, the exertion and the commitment. You're committed. That's it. Every Wednesday night, I'm committed to this class, no matter rain or shine, no matter what. And I did it, doing it now since 1982, end of 81, 82, which would be what? 92, 2002, 2000, 36 years. Okay? I'm not tooting my horn. I'm not suggesting I'm the only committed person, but I'm just speaking a personal example. Commitment. It's a commitment to certain values that you believe in. And I'm specifically speaking about a commitment, good commitments. I'm not talking about bad commitments. I'm not talking about committed to just satisfying every one of your indulgence. The next thing I'll hear someone say, yes, I'm committed. I'm committed to indulging myself. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about committing to a value, to something greater than yourself. Then what happens is your commitment to that which is greater accesses your inner strengths and brings them forth. And the first thing is the exertion. I can again speak for myself as a writer, as a teacher. There are many times ideas that I've already explained one way, another way, and it's already inside me. It comes almost automatically because I've done it so many times. But exertion is where you push yourself further. You take the same subject and delve deeper, find another angle, realize that what was explained last time was maybe perhaps inadequate in some way. Allow yourself to be challenged. Even though you could easily say, hey, who are you to challenge me? I've already worked it out, developed this, I've written a book, I've written more than one book, people respect my teachings, etc. No. Exertion, pushing yourself more further and further. That's where you achieve excellence. Because the exertion is like the striking of the flintstone. Just like the commitment is the striking of the flintstone. So what I've just explained, just for the source material, is actually based on a very classic, what we call a Hasidic series of discourses called a Hemshech. And this particular one is called Hemshech Tafrei Samach Vav. Tafrei Samach Vav, or sometimes Hemshech Samach Vav. Tafrei Samach Vav is the year 5666. The Hebrew year 5666. We're now in the Hebrew year of 5778. So 5666. Or Samach Vav is 66. Referring to a discourse, a series of discourses of 61 discourses that were delivered in that year 5666, which corresponds to the year 1906, 1907, and 1908. Over those 3 years, these discourses were delivered. And a central theme in those discourses is these two methodologies. Obviously discussed in much more dense and complex ways, these two methodologies of exertion and commitment that allow you to access deeper resources within yourself. Now I'm mentioning this not just for those that are looking for the source, but if you go on our site, meaningfullife.com, samachvav.com, Samach Vav, search for Samach Vav, you'll find a summary, a running summary of these discourses, as well as analysis of some of the themes. I think you'll find it quite interesting and complementing what I'm discussing here. So that's on our site, and look up these ideas and you'll see them there. Very interesting topic, fascinating actually, because what it does is it helps you access parts of yourself that you may not even be aware of. So can you measure how much potential you have when you do this striking? When you exert yourself and you commit to it, can you know how much will come out of it? No, we do not know, because it could be a bottomless pit in a way, in a good way, an endless journey. But one thing is guaranteed, you will access things you've never accessed before. There's no question about it. Because anything you've done till now, it will be based on the results of the efforts that you've done till now. And you know that already. You know what your experiences in the past are like. We're looking for something new in our lives, which in itself is a great thing, to have something new, fresh, exciting, new adventure. So to access something new, you need to do something new. So if you can exert yourself as much as you exerted yourself yesterday, you're going to get yesterday's results. If you want new results, you need more exertion and more commitment. So the exertion and commitment itself is the commensurate to that effort will be the results that you get out of it. That is the secret to the whole thing. Now, why this is so difficult is because we resist exertion, and we resist effort, and we resist commitment. Part of the problem is because we've already gotten so-called trapped in our own rut that it's difficult to get out of that. That is why you need the commitment. You need to just say, I'm going to do this. And I was always asked the question over the years, why does God want us to do these and these mitzvot exactly like this? It comes the 7th day of the week, Shabbat, certain moment, all work has to stop. What is this absolute dogma? Same thing, this is what you should eat, what you can't eat. Different holidays have its obligations, things you're allowed to do, things you're not allowed to do. We live in a permissive society. I understand everything with moderation, but why is these rules? You must do this, you can't do that. Mitzvah sesa, you must do, let's just say you're not allowed to do. Obviously there's a whole range on the spectrum of things that are permissible and can go either way. But there's many things, do's and don'ts. Thou shalt or thou shalt not. So I remember over the years I struggled with answering this. Not that I didn't have an answer. for myself, but how to explain this in a palatable way. Especially in this open society, how do you explain such rules? Now, obviously, even the Constitution of the United States, which is not divine, man-made, knows these are absolute rules. I mean, absolute. They're not absolute in the divine sense, but you have to have a rule book. And they will debate a line in the Constitution or a line in a ruling, a legal ruling, ad infinitum, because you need to have guidelines. And say, this is what the dictum says. This is what the law says, and you can't waver from that. So obviously we all understand the need for having certain type of this is right, this is wrong. But what is the fundamental explanation of this on a deeper level? The fundamental explanation for it is because we are human beings, left to our own devices, we will gravitate to the easiest way, to the path of least resistance. We'll want to become couch potatoes. Because we have that side to us. I want to relax. I want to do nothing. So you don't have not exertion, not commitment. What do you think is going to happen? You'll languish. And you will scrounge your own potential and resources. And you will never really excel. You'll just gravitate back to the easy way. That's why it's critical. No, I'm committed. I'm in. And I sign, to yourself, you're committed to do what you have to get done. Take away that, then say, you know what? I always have a back door out. I said I'll try my best. Didn't work out. Okay, plan B, move on. I'm like my exit strategy. There's some people excellent at that. They are escape artists. They always have a way out. And you say, what's wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that. It's fine when you're, God forbid, in a burning building. When you're in danger, you should have a way out, an exit strategy, fire escape hatch. But when you are living life, you want to have things you're committed to completely. You want to have someone you love and you're in for good, whether it's easy or hard. People you love. You want to have commitments to your value system, and you want your commitments to carry you when you're not in the mood. If it's going to be up to your mood, it'll change it could change at whim. So that's why the Torah says do's and don'ts. This is a commitment. It's a commitment. Just like, how would we like if God said to us, you know what, when I'm in the mood, I'll give you life. When I'm not in the mood, I won't. No, we want a commitment. Now, obviously, there are tragedies that happen and sad things happen, but we want a commitment that our human physical beings are structured as such that when your lungs are working and your heart is working, you're going to breathe. And it's a commitment to life. Your life is committed to. Things can happen, but you see millions of children born all the time, healthy children, beautiful children. So that's a commitment. There's a commitment to this. It's not optional. The same thing in our own lives. You want to have things you're absolutely committed to, because that carries you. Precisely for the reason that you don't want it, that's why you need it. It carries you and anchors you in times when you may be wavering, you may be weak. You want to know that you have a strong nest. You want to have a strong, solid foundation of a home when the storm strikes. You don't want to say, oh, you know what, too bad. You want to have something to run to, something to lean on, something to depend on. That's what commitment does. It gives you a solid grounding. I'm in. And that commitment carries you in times when you may not be in the mood. And that commitment also leads you to the exertion part. Because the exertion is that you want to achieve the most you can. You want to achieve excellence. You want to push it, push the envelope, push yourself. So the exertion, that effort achieves this. So basically what I'm saying is that when a person is exhausted or frustrated or tired or all the other words that we used here, no energy, spent, falling from my feet, overwhelmed, drained, we could have two options. Actually three options. You could have one option where you just give up and say, you know what, that's how I feel, and I just go to sleep and I'll just give in. You have another option of taking some opioids or some other tranquilizers or, what are the things? Stimulants is the word I want to use, that give you Red Bull or caffeine or much worse stuff that just gives you a jolt to get you out of that state. Or the third and the healthiest, pot, the cigarette, whatever it is, yeah. food, all the addictions. Or the third option is what I'm suggesting, the healthy option, which I believe is the only real option, is to say, okay, maybe I don't have to give in to the fact that I'm exhausted and not try to medicate myself or numb it to relieve myself of the pressure. Maybe I have to just take the bull by the horns and say, okay, maybe let me commit myself to something that's a good thing. Let me work hard and exert. Let me try out Rabbi Jacobson's suggestion, which is actually from the mystics and from the sources that I cited, and see. It's not the easiest option. I know the first two are easier. Of course the first two. It's much easier to just take a sleeping pill and go back to bed, or turn on the TV, or entertain yourself, or in some other way indulge yourself. Of course it's easier. It's also easier to numb yourself. But the healthiest, and what will be sustainable, and what really be the best for you, is option 3. I would like anyone to argue. Maybe some people may not choose option 3, but no one's going to argue that option 3 isn't the healthiest approach. You'll say, I'm not ready for it. I'm too tired. I'll do it when I'm on vacation, which of course is another procrastinating excuse. But option 3 is the way, my friends. So now, those that have not heard this before, now there's no more excuse. Now you've heard it. Now that you've heard it, you can no longer say, I was never given a third option. Now you have been. Now, I'm saying that intentionally because it brings to mind a few funny incidents that have happened, more than a few in my lifetime. I remember once in this class, I mentioned this a number of times years ago, a young guy, very cool guy, was his late 20s, early 30s, coming to the class, very smart, very spiritual, very intrigued. A few months, and he was really used to ask questions, and he was very engaged, very involved, and engaged and engaging. One day, I see Wednesday, he's not at the class. And he calls me the next day, he says Thursday, he says, I've become addicted to your class, I love it, I come every week. I brought friends, but I can't come anymore for now. I said, why? Something happened? He says, yeah, you're making my life miserable. And I start realizing my girlfriend is just very superficial. I realize other things I'm doing are just nonsense. I come to your class, I feel guilty about everything else I'm doing. Because you're showing me the higher standard, higher values. And I'm too young, I have too much energy and too much hormones and too much adrenaline in me to just become so serious about life. I need to have a little more time off, fun, and ignore the bigger questions of life. So, coming to your class, I love what you teach, but it's just, I need a few more. As I get a little older, more wrinkled, and people won't see me so attractive, etc., that's when I'll come back. I burst out laughing practically, even though it was sad. I said to him, it was the first time I got such a compliment. But I hear you. Anyway, I wanted to see what happened. A few weeks passed, he's back. I said to him one time, he says, I couldn't really stay away. This class became his drug, when actually what the rest of his life was his drug. So he came. So I remember when he was here, I didn't say any names. I said, there's someone I know who gave me the biggest compliment of all. What is that? I'm making his life miserable. So sometimes knowing these things are not always what you want to find out, but I have to say it's the key to life. And it's like with the red and the blue pill in the Matrix. He says, you take this pill, you go back to your illusion. You take this pill, your eyes will be open to the realities. So I would like to say is that the key is that you have, every one of us, and every one of us has tremendous, tremendous potential beyond what we can ever imagine. And there's ways to access it. And the ways is the exertion and the commitment. Or maybe the commitment and the exertion. That's what's necessary. And there's no excuse. There's no such thing as exhausted. It's like saying I'm too exhausted to breathe. I'm too exhausted to eat. I'm too exhausted to give love, to be loved. These are fundamental ingredients and fundamental nourishment that sustain us. The same thing is with purpose and meaning, and the same thing is with our own actualizing who we are. That's not some optional hobby. That is who we are. That's what makes you a healthy person. When you don't actualize your skills, it's like it's atrophy. So it's just like a person will say, I'm too lazy, I'm too exhausted to use my hands. I'm too exhausted to get out of bed. What will happen? At some point, your muscles will atrophy. Same thing is psychologically and emotionally saying, no, I'm too exhausted to do anything. No, You have to do something because or else you will atrophy the thing that you commit. The key is, and this also allows you to be able to overcome any challenge in life. And I could share this again with me personally. Coming consistently this class and other commitments I've made, sometimes you sit back and say, why did I make this commitment? I'm overwhelmed. There's too much going on. But you know something? Afterwards, I realize that it actually saves my life. It forces me to produce, it pushes me further, and you become a greater person as a result. But this is not an ego trip. Greater person, I mean greater and fulfilling your potential and actualizing your great potential. So these are the keys to all types of growth and to all methods in this type of discussion. So, with that, I would like to sum up and say this is essentially the mission of the Meaningful Life Center, is to help every one of us actualize our great potential in fulfilling the purpose and mission for which we were sent to this world. Commitment and exertion. Keep those two things in mind. Now, this doesn't mean cold turkey. It just means begin to push yourself more. And get somebody that will push with you, because it's very hard to do sometimes on your own. It's just like a seesaw, you need each other to leverage each other. The same thing is with any type of engaging. The pressure that another person challenges you, you challenge them in return. These are the things that create tremendous, tremendous sparks from the flintstone of our inner superconscious. Could be getting involved in a project where you're challenged, you're challenging others, but it's going toward a positive end. You'd be surprised what happens when you do that. Because everything, besides everything else, it also moves you into positive territory, into areas that are growthful. Why not get involved with a project? Volunteer for a project that you believe in, that you want to be part of. Bring your skills. Sometimes it just comes down to common sense, some legwork, some research. You'd be surprised when you incubate and you work with others who are of the same caliber like that, driven by that. Everyone brings their strengths. These are things that you go. These are commitments. These are things and pushing yourself beyond what you're capable of, not just satisfied with the comfort zone and the status quo. So please see us at the Meaningful Life Center as an ally, a resource, in any way possible to achieve these goals. That's what we do. We have a full array of life skills and resources available at meaningfullife.com. Please stay in touch with us, like us, share, communicate, pass it on, and we're here every Wednesday around 8:30 p.m. This is both online and on location. And until next week, everyone have a blessed week, a week of commitment and exertion, a week that you are able to actualize deeper strengths than you ever could have imagined. Thank you so much.